Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. All very nice to be here. I'm happy to be here with you this Sunday. And we have some interesting questions, some deep philosophical questions on the Bhagavad-gita, sort of advanced questions that Nicholas sent. And first of all, let me know if you're hearing me, if you can hear me fine, if the image and sound are okay. Please type in if you're here watching. Let me know if you're hearing me well. So is everybody getting sound and image? Please let me know. Hi, Patricia. Okay, so here are the questions we have. And so the first question I have here is in chapter 17. Krishna says that according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: sattva, rajas, and tamas, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Would you explain this and how the Vedas explain the differences of faith in each mode? So this topic is really something that we see specifically in the Gita. And in the Gita, Krishna explains it very nicely in chapter 17. And pretty much all of chapter 17 is about that topic. And what does Krishna do? First of all, in verse 4, he just gives a simple, direct explanation. He says that those in the mode of goodness, sattva, this is material modes of nature. So these are not transcendental. This is not a transcendental religious process. Krishna is talking about the whole chapter 17. Let me just back up a bit. The whole chapter 17 is Krishna saying, okay, this is all great, Krishna. All this, you've given me yoga for 16 chapters here. You've taught me all about yoga and you and transcendence and all this stuff. But what happens with other people who are not in the path of transcendence? So then Krishna says, oh, okay, so that's the people who have a religious inclination, but they're not transcendental. So they're still in mundane. It's like a mundane faith. So what about those people? So then he gets those people and he talks about them in chapter 17. It's quite interesting. And he starts out in verse 4 of chapter 17, giving this simple explanation. Look, overall, if a person is dominated by sattva, then that person will worship the demigods, the devas. If that person is in the mode of rajas, he will worship asuras. And if the person's in the mode of ignorance, tamoguna, he'll worship ghosts and spirits. So that's how he defines it. But remember, it's very important to understand we're talking not about, for example, the modern world with faith in, like Christianity and Islam. We're not talking about that. We're talking specifically about people who don't have a concept of a higher supreme God, of the Supreme Lord. This is a different kind of thing which we don't see much in the world anymore, which we used to see back in the time when Krishna was around. We don't see that so much anymore because basically the whole world was kind of taken over by the major Abrahamic religions, and of course in the East by Buddhism and different traditions within what we call Hinduism. So you don't really see that so much. But in the past, that's what you would see. So those were the different types of religion, but you don't really see, it's not a subject that comes up too much in other texts, like the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our other major text. So it doesn't come up at all in the Yoga Sutras. So this is something specific to the Bhagavad-gita, and it's not like a major subject of the Vedas. But the idea of the Vedas is that the Vedas was a religion for those who were worshiping the devas. That's what's important to understand in the context of the Bhagavad-gita. That Krishna explains the Bhagavad-gita to a world that was practicing the Vedic religion of worshipping the demigods, the devas, which is here described as sattva-guna. So it's like the best version of religiosity, where you're still not a yogi, you're not a transcendentalist, you don't love God. The best version of that is what we'd find all over the ancient worlds. You know, like the Greeks with their demigod worship, Zeus, etc., and the Nordic, Nordic people of Europe with Thor, and of course in Africa we had all sorts of deity worship, and the Aztecs worshiping the sun god. So those were considered the best versions of mundane religiosity without transcendence. Now, what happens in chapter 17 is that then Krishna goes on to describe religiosity according to three things: offering, yagya, what you do with yourself, tapas, and what you give to others, dana. So what's described, sometimes translated as a sacrifice or offering. This is tapas, is translated as austerity, and then there's the last one is translated as charity. So he kind of like describes the religious process as a process of making offerings, things you do with yourself, and the kind of charity you give. And then the whole chapter 17 is divided like that. So the chapter 17 is an explanation of these practices in this way that Krishna described it. It's quite interesting in that regard. So, also it explained that the conclusion is that blind faith in a particular mode of nature cannot help a person become elevated to the perfectional stage. What is the concept of blind faith through the point of view of the Vedas? So, no, there's no such thing as blind faith. That's a modern term. But what this means is that the point of this whole chapter, and this is like a subtopic of the whole Bhagavad-gita, is that it's not enough to do things well in the material world. It's not enough to be in sattva-guna. It's not enough to live your dharma. That's why Krishna finishes the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 18, by saying, Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Don't take shelter of the dharmas, but take shelter of me alone. So it's not enough to be a good dharmic person. It's not enough to be in sattva, because everything that you do in the material world is temporary, will go away, and the modes are always in competition for supremacy. So all this is going to go. So the only thing that won't go, here, as you said here, perfectional stage, is transcendence, is when you become enlightened. So until you become enlightened, until you follow yoga, you won't have the ultimate result. And that's the point. That's the message of throughout the whole Bhagavad-gita, and of course the major message, that Prabhupada tries to emphasize as well, is that until you get to this final stage of full, perfect, loving devotion to God, becoming a perfect yogi, until you become a liberated soul, you're still trapped in the material world. You're still going to be subject to reincarnation, and you're going to mess up and trip up and fall into the other modes again. Krishna talks to Arjuna about the divisions of faith according to the modes and nature required by the embodied soul, but he also talks to him about the austerities and penances, the food each person prefers, the sacrifices, and the charities performed. Is he talking about these things because they're related to the kind of faith that we have? Yeah, it's just like I said, it's an interesting way Krishna presented religion in the three things: giving, what you do with your, offerings to higher beings, what you do with yourself, and charity, what you do to people who are in a lower position to you. So he kind of described the whole religious process in these three things, as well as what kind of food you eat. So I thought, it's quite an interesting way of seeing it, because religions, you can kind of like analyze religions from this point of view, like who are they worshiping, like what kind of offerings are they making, what rules do they have with themselves, how do they see the process of helping others, charity, and what kind of foods do they eat. So that's just the way Krishna presented this way of analyzing a person's faith or state of mind or religious belief. And then you say, Krishna also talks about the threefold austerity of body, speech, and mind. So yeah, in the subject of tapas, he divides that into three more subjects. He says, okay, in tapas, we can talk about tapas of the mind, tapas of speech, and tapas of the body. And then he describes that exactly in verse 14 and 15 and 16. So verses 14, 15, and 16 of chapter 17 is about the austerity of body, speech, and mind. Okay, so it's just it's just a way, it's just an interesting bit of information. In this little part of the Bhagavad-gita, though, I find verse 15 of chapter 17 especially important, and something that we as yogis should definitely try to put into practice in our lives. And he says that, that the austerity, the tapas of speech is to say things that are pleasant, beneficial, that won't disturb others, or to just recite Vedic texts. So that's very important, to say things that are pleasant, beneficial, and that won't disturb other people. And if you can't say anything like that, then it's better to remain silent. So I like that verse a lot, and I try to put that into practice, and I recommend that all my students try to practice that for a better world. In chapter 18, it is explained that the process of renunciation should be considered in terms of modes of nature in which it is performed. Krishna says that if anyone who gives up prescribed duties, the dharmas, as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort, is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. And if one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is in the mode of ignorance. So what's the difference between the two, you ask? Well, in the mode of passion, at least there's some calculations of what's actually, materially speaking, better or worse. So it's not the best way of thinking. The best way of thinking is in the mode of goodness, where you guided only by Dharma, what is right and what is not, what has to be done and what cannot be done. And that's all. And it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or you're going to get in trouble, you're going to be persecuted, you're going to be in jail, you're going to be glorified. That doesn't matter. If it has to be done, if it's the correct thing, if it's the right thing to do, you do it. And if it's not, you don't do it. So that's the mode of goodness. That's the ideal. And then the second level is, at least you're thinking in terms of material comfort, and you're making good decisions in terms of you have some basis for your decision. Okay, that might get me in trouble. That's going to be a bit too painful. So it's not the way to do it. It's not ideal, but at least it has some, good sense to it. There's some knowledge, there's some basis of at least you're going to be more comfortable. At least you won't get in trouble. At least, you're not going to spend money. There's some basis to it. It's all selfish. It's a selfish consideration, but at least, there is some basis of it being selfishly positive. And then the mode of ignorance in tamoguna is just a mess. It's just you just don't do things just because you're stupid, you're crazy, you just have no idea. Or you just, you might even get hurt yourself, even selfishly speaking, you'll be worse off by not doing what you should have done. So even selfishly speaking, there's no logic to it. It's just a disaster from beginning to the end. So it's in that sense that you can see the difference. Krishna says that it's indeed impossible for an embodied soul being to give up all activities, but he who renounces the fruit of action is one who has truly renounced. I understand that the fruits of action have a relationship with the reactions and the qualities of living beings. When a soul is in Krishna consciousness, naturally to do activities in order to share this philosophy. Would there be a material desire to do this activity? Would be the fruits of this, the more and more souls change its life in being Krishna conscious. Yeah, no, it's different. So the whole point of this this section where Krishna says that you can't give up action, but you have to give up the fruits of action, is the basis of everything that I teach. It's the basis of yoga. It's the concept where you should do things because they're right, not thinking of the future and what kind of results you're going to get. Because you have the right to action, but not the right to the result. Because the result, when you act, you contribute, your action contributes to the totality of reality. So it's no longer your reality. It's a reality that belongs to many other souls and, of course, ultimately to God. So when you act, you can't guarantee the result because it's not your reality. You can only do your part. So you contribute to the totality of reality by your action. And you have the right to do your action. But from then on, it's in the future. It's no longer your responsibility. It's like right now, I have a responsibility. What happens in the future, it's not my responsibility. For example, right now, I'm a little worried because it's very dark and rainy here and there's thunder falling all over the place. So I might lose electricity and connection at any moment because it happens at this time of the year here. But I'm doing my duty. I'm giving the class on time, doing my best while I still have energy. But the result, will I be able to do the whole class? Not up to me. It's up to there's other factors involved, including the will of Krishna. So I just have to do my action. So the point is, you don't think of the result, even for the highest, nicest thing, like, oh, I'm going to help people become Krishna conscious. Whatever your goal is, oh, I want to build a temple for Krishna. Even that, you don't think of the result. You focus your mind in the here and now. Right now, if I think it's a good idea to help people become Krishna conscious, if it's a good idea to help people become yogis, what can I do right now about it? And I'll do that. And if it's going to work, if it's not going to work, if it's going to be one person, 1,000,000 people, that's the result. That's not my problem. And if I worry about the problem, then I'm just falling into the mundane conception of life. I'm again falling in a non-yogic state of mind, and I'm going to fill my mind with anxiety and fear and envy and this and that whole poisonous cocktail of horrible emotions you get when your mind drifts into the future. So no matter what the goal is, no matter how pure and wonderful it is, yes, I want to do this for Krishna, I want to build a beautiful temple, fine. Then what should you do now to build a temple? Oh, today I should do a newsletter. I should, maybe come up with this campaign for raising funds. Okay, just do that. And keep your mind focused on your action right now. And then the result, it's up to Krishna. It's not up to you. It's up to other souls, other entities, and Krishna himself. So that's the very important point that we have to take from the Bhagavad-gita. That is the key point, which I call this mindfulness, of course. Is the state of mindfulness is the essence, the beginning of your higher states of consciousness. It's this mind in the here and now. And that's the key point. That's why Krishna talks about it from the beginning of the Gita to the very end of the Gita. Keeps emphasizing this point in different ways and different forms. Krishna talks about the threefold fruits of action: desirable, undesirable, and mixed. When we do something expecting good results, it is probably more easily to understand the aspect of renunciation. But how is the renunciation in the case of undesirable results? Is it accepting the bad reactions? Yes, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's why it could be a good result, desirable, mixed, or undesirable. We don't know what's going to happen. Even with the best intentions you might have, the results, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So you just don't worry about it. You just renounce it as you're performing the action. That's the correct state of mind. You perform your action unattached to the results. And then when the results come in, okay, that's your new set of facts, your new data. And on top of the data, you decide, okay, what's my best action from this point on? Because the result is only important in the sense of when it becomes the here and now, it will be an essential consideration of my strategy for going forward from this point. So like that's how it works. At every moment, you're taking in the results of past actions, which is your life right now. Your life at this very moment is the result of your past actions. So then you take your life today and you say, okay, so what's the best action for me at this very moment? And of course, taking into consideration reality, how you are and how you're feeling, where you are, what do you want to do, and your dharma and everything, that defines how you want to act right now. And then you do that. And then the next day, you get this other set of results, and like in a month from now and a year from now. And so every moment that you're alive, you're collecting the results of your past actions, both in practical terms and cosmic, karmic terms, whatever it is, you just have the result. And then you take that result, and on top of that, you ask yourself, what is the best I can do with this? What is the most appropriate, purest thing I can do? What's the thing I'm going to be most satisfied, that's the truest to my essential nature, that will most please Krishna if you're already devoted? And you just do that. And then the result tomorrow, like, okay, well, that wasn't such a good meal. I'll try this now. And then you try it, and then you just, every moment, you're just doing your best. Not worried about the result. Of course, you do things, like right now, I should press this button for this to happen. But not that you're worried about that thing happening or not. You're just like, that's what I should do now, is do this. I should do that. So that's what it means. It's a difficult and very important topic to understand. And then you say Krishna explains the 5 factors of action and 3 factors that motivate action and the 3 constituents of action. It's a very philosophical and kind of a difficult part of the 18th chapter. The beginning of the 18th chapter has this rather complicated, Shankara, like sort of just a sort of a complicated philosophical part, where you have to understand like these different philosophical concepts, And so then you ask, if soul and super soul are comparable to 2 friendly birds sitting in the same tree, the soul is eating the fruit of the tree and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend, how is it the activities depend on the will of the super soul? So now what that means is, again, when you do something, you have your action. I do my part. But then Krishna says in this section, but there's many factors to that action. So your performance is one factor. And there are other factors, such as the place where you're performing it, like who you are that's performing it. And then, of course, how much effort you're putting into it. And then lastly, but not least, the will of the Lord. So he says there's all these, that's why we're not attached to the action, because I don't have that much control over it. I have a little bit of control, but not that much control over it, because there's the other factors, and that's the whole point. And ultimately, there's the will of God. So do you not act? No, you have to act, but you know that your action depends on other things as well. And that's the whole point. As is explained in verse 13:3, the perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literatures as jnana and gyanam. And in verse 13:13 is explained that the noble gyam are the soul and the super soul. Is the knower parigyata, the doer, karta? How does the knower motivate the action? So these are, you probably have many different answers to these questions, but is the knower the doer? Yes, but there's 2 knowers. There's a super soul knower and there's you knower, right? That's the whole point of that chapter 13, is to understand that there's 2 people who know the field of activities. The soul, the individual soul, and the super soul. So there's 2 knowers. But who's acting? We are. The individual soul is acting. And then you ask, how does the knower, how does the soul motivate action? Well, that's just the interaction of the soul with matter which happens through the mind. Through the consciousness reflects desire, the soul, we can take command over intelligence, and intelligence takes command of our mind. So it starts at the false ego level, the ahamkara. As you identify with soul, as with your true spiritual self, then you can take command of your intelligence, and your intelligence can take command of your mind, and your mind can take command of the senses, and through the senses, you can then manipulate material energy. That's the concept. So yeah, so don't get too caught up in these complicated philosophical terms. It's really not that important, and it's just Krishna just puts that there as a kind of a sankhya, just to add to like a sankhya knowledge of yoga. But this isn't something that you really worry about too much, or that you actually put into practice. At least it hasn't been for me. Just to know the basic concept of you not being the sole motivator of the results, which is a very good thing to realize. That's what you can take from this, to know that you're not alone, that there are other factors involved. So those were great questions. I have to thank again Nicholas for his excellent, intelligent questions. If anybody else has more questions, please post them here on the chat. It's pouring down rain here. I'm just in thunder in the distance. Any second now, Krishna can cut this connection. So if it does, please don't be too upset. So any more questions? Just so you know, the international group, next week we're finally starting a new campaign directed to the English-speaking world. So let's see if we start getting new students to join us in our course. So I'm hoping, that we're doing our best now. I'm hoping we'll be able to bring some new students to the course. Thank you, Nicholas, for your questions. Did you hear that? Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think I'll stop here before Krishna stops us with a bolt of lightning. Thank you very much for being here, for participating, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday. And if you have any more questions, please post on your WhatsApp groups. Hare Krishna.